My connection is really slow today. Hey,
Hey, how are
how you?
you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Sorry,
Where are you?
this is my first Instagram live chat.
Oh, well,
Done other
welcome.
chats. Yeah,
But not an IG live chat. So
yeah,
you're a virgin, an IG live chat
as it
virgin.
were. Yeah,
Yes, as it were. So where are you right now?
I'm at home
You're at
in
home?
Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Chicago. Nice. And so yeah, how are you doing?
Well, today was weird.
Yeah.
I went to the dentist
Uh-huh.
and I didn't realize that like fillings take a long time to. So like
Oh.
this side of my mouth is still frozen.
Oh no.
But so if I look kind of like on this
Yeah.
side, then But
You're not having a stroke.
no, or Bell's palsy or anything like that.
Right,
I'm
right,
good.
right. You're
Yeah,
having a tooth moment. You know, it happens. I'm
yeah.
surprised that you got to go to the dentist. The dentists are open now
In Chicago, yeah.
in Chicago. Wow.
Mm,
Yeah. Not here so much.
I know. You can
Yeah,
get
nothing's
haircuts
open.
and
Did you?
dentists, and yeah,
Yeah.
great.
No, I
Yeah.
haven't cut my hair for 6 months.
How does it look
It's
so
a
good?
tragedy. Well, I've become a professional at cutting my bangs because I've been doing that like every
Ah,
week. But the rest of it is it's an
like down to
unholy
your
mess.
knees. Yeah.
Like pretty much. It's very,
That's
yeah,
it.
exactly. It's very Rapunzel right now.
Oh,
Very
good.
Rapunzel. So, hey, Edwin, for all our viewers, and just want to get a background because I've known you for ages, but I don't know your origin story. All I know is that you grew up in Santa Monica and you played the bass. But
Yeah,
did
both
you
true.
come from a musical family? Like, how did that all start for you?
Music business family.
Ah.
My grandmother worked for Ella Fitzgerald for 40 years and was a big figure in jazz. Was
Oh.
started as Norman Grantz's secretary at Verve
Mm-hmm.
Records, and kind of worked her way up through the ranks. And that when I was kind of aware of things, she was running, kind of looking after Ella, Oscar Peterson, Joe Pass,
Mm-hmm.
um, and and my dad, her son, worked at Warner Records also. So
Ah, okay.
I was actually surrounded a lot more by rock and jazz than I was by classical when I was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the public schools in Santa Monica where I grew up got me into classical, but I was already kind of deep
Mm.
diving, kind of artsy 80s like listener because I got all my music for free at that time, as a kid,
Ah,
and
uh-huh. Yeah,
because of
yeah.
the record company thing. So if I wanted to hear like Led Zeppelin, I would get all the LPs, and I was by the time I got excited about classical music, I was really deep into like crazy music, like Ornette Coleman and like The Residents,
Huh.
and really kind of avant-garde stuff. And then
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
minute I started, I got a bass teacher through the schools who's amazing, and the right teacher like got me crazy about classical music, and then it
Hmm.
all took off. Yeah, it was all really
Wow.
fast from that point. It was more like 13 or 14.
Yeah, so like later for a classical musician, because you
Yeah,
usually think of a string player starting like when they're 6 or 7.
maybe not a
Although with
bass
with bass,
player.
I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, bass is a little bit later, so I guess
yeah,
kind of normal for bass. Though these days, they're starting earlier,
really
and
early. Yeah.
yeah, and
So,
so in that point, I was just mad bass player, uh,
mm-hmm.
and in LA at that time, if you were a good bass player, you got really good opportunities because there were no youth orchestras, like proper youth orchestras, like there are in like
Mm.
Boston or
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco where I conducted, and like really the orchestras that were all more like for people in their 20s. So in
Right.
LA there was the debut orchestra and the American Youth Symphony, and I got to play in both of those,
Cool.
which is because basses are in demand, and I guess
Right.
that's good enough. So. And I also played in the Crossroads Orchestra, which was a great school where a lot of wonderful string players came from.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go there. I went to Santa Monica High School, and I think I was the original bass player of the Colburn Chamber Orchestra, like when it was founded.
Really?
Yeah, so
Wow.
I was kind of like the LA gigger. Like I was driving around LA a lot, all
Mm-hmm.
over to Hollywood, my senior year, and I think was playing in 5 different orchestras, and
That's
and
crazy.
got in a car crash going from one gig to another. In Santa Monica because
Oh shit! What happened to your
I was
bass?
listening to bass was okay.
Uh-huh. Were you
Uh,
okay?
I was okay. I was in a
Okay.
Volvo, but I was I was listening to Beethoven 9, and I ran a red light. I was distracted and very bad.
Oh, that's
Teenage
great.
drivers are not good. You just don't
Yeah,
know. You know?
yeah.
Yeah,
So true. Wow. And so we met at Harvard.
we did.
And so did you conduct before then? Or did that sort of
Little bit.
come to you as something in college? So a little bit?
Um, yeah, I think I started trading like bass teaching at summer camp for conducting, like assistant
Mm-hmm.
conducting the orchestras in this
Yeah, yeah.
Idlewild. Um, and maybe I by 90, no, I was in college already. I'd
Mm-hmm.
started doing little things here and there, kind of bartering or just
Mm-hmm.
asking to assist. And
Right,
I
right.
think, when I auditioned for Vox Society, I think I got a lesson from somebody or just, and I had
Yeah.
played, I think I'd played with so many orchestras and so many, by then I'd already played an orchestra with like Previn and Dutoit. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'd seen all these conductors. I had seen conducting being taught. And
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
there was a thing called the LA Phil Institute, which I also played in, which is
Mm-hmm.
like Tanglewood, like TMC, but
Ah,
in
okay.
LA. And again, I was a little young for it, but I got to do it. And so I
Mm.
got to see a lot of conducting being taught and kind of got maybe a head start compared to a lot of people of how it works
Yeah, yeah.
by watching that. So I kind
Mm-hmm.
of was able to kind of, do the audition
Mm-hmm.
for that experience.
Which was it a good experience? I'm assuming it was a good
Box
experience.
off?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a great experience. It was, for those who don't know, it's a famous orchestra at Harvard that's student conducted. Um, you can do it for 2 years, and a lot of people have done it. I think like looking back, it's like being thrown into the fire because you're
Mm-hmm,
not
mm-hmm.
only conducting, your music directing, and so
Right, right.
you're also like dealing with your friends who want to play solos and doing the seating and like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, and I think I learned a lot. You know,
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
know, just I mean the music experience was amazing, and like the managerial experience was a bit humbling, at
Yeah,
that
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But
that's interesting because no, go ahead.
yeah, it set me up though for later, learning. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm interested in that managerial bit because I think a lot of people don't think of conductors as anything but, musicians on a podium guiding other musicians. But what would you say, proportionally speaking, what part of a conductor's job is not musical in your experience?
Mm, at least half, or no,
Yeah.
maybe 40% or something. I don't know. If you're in charge of an organization
Mm-hmm.
like an orchestra and you're doing all the admin, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And also just meetings and maybe for me, because so much of my work now is putting crazy concerts together, there's a lot more,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not just going and conducting, go home. So
Right, right.
yeah, but I think it's a lot. And music directors just, as an assistant conductor, I was this assistant conductor for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
kind of had an idea of the dynamics of, the musicians and the conductor and all that. But uh, when when you became music director, like the stuff that comes across your desk on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, we see everything and we hear everything, and
Yeah, yeah.
and we're dealing with everything. And I think I didn't understand it until I actually started doing it.
Yeah, and that's kind of trial by fire, right? It's not like you learn that in conservatory or music school. It's
No,
on the
I mean I
job.
learned it running box sock a little bit,
Right.
but yeah, which is great. But yeah, it's definitely a hard. It's a lot. I didn't hate it. I actually liked.
Mhm.
I liked fundraising. I liked,
Mhm.
looking at the brochure, coming up with a vision for the season. I liked
Mhm. Mhm.
all of that. I didn't so much um, like arbitrating squabbles among musicians.
Yeah.
Don't love
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
But someone has to do it. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why. Yeah. So that
I
was
don't
one
think.
part I didn't miss.
Yeah, the squabbles between
Yeah.
musicians. Yeah, I mean that's what your personnel manager is for, right?
Yeah.
Ostensibly. Yeah, yeah. So you
They help.
hope.
Yeah.
But you spent a decade in Kitchener Waterloo. Was
Yeah.
it 10 years? That's
10 years.
that's a
Absolutely.
good chunk of time.
Hmm.
So, what was that experience like?
It was amazing. I mean, it was. I still am so fond of that orchestra, and I think I was hired in a time of total crisis there.
Mhm.
They had fired
Well,
their previous conductor.
hmm.
The one before that didn't last too long, but this one was fired mid-season,
Whoa.
kind of a standoff. He was well, I'll just say it was Martin Fischbiskow, who was, you know, and he
Oh.
was, and Kitchener at that time was a very German uh, community, and
Oh.
there was a
Mm-hmm.
conflict. I mean, as happens between the manager and the conductor,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and not, I wasn't there. I don't know how it happened, but
Right. Right.
it became very drastic, and so
Huh.
it got to be. I think there was a story about the orchestra's conflict in the paper every day for 72 days in a row or something like
Oh my
that.
God.
There were
Wow.
separate board slates competing to take over the organization, like voting pro
Mm-hmm.
against the
Mm-hmm.
musician. Orchestra
Yeah.
was,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, from what I understand, divided in half, pro and con. It was,
Wow.
so it was a really contentious situation. And so in the
Wow.
meantime, as many people know, running orchestras, if you're dealing with a conflict, you're not doing your day-to-day business. And so they, in
Mm-hmm.
the meantime,
Mm-hmm.
we're starting to run out of money just because they
Right.
weren't, it was all internal. And so when I was hired to kind of build bridges and build back. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I was able to do that. And I think the advantage of that is that they were ready for such a clean slate after all they had been through, and
Mm-hmm.
to try
Mm-hmm.
new things and to reinvent. And that was kind of my,
Right. Right.
and they explicitly asked me to do that. And so for my crazy ideas, I got a lot of support there
Yeah.
for 10
Yeah.
years, and they were on board, and we just built almost, I wouldn't say musically from the ground up, because the musicians were always very good, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
kind of conceptually
Mm-hmm.
the what the orchestra is. It gave us a
Right. Right.
chance. This crisis, which is kind of like, I guess, apropos right now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this crisis gave us a chance to rebuild. You know,
Right.
and
Right. Right.
I mean, this crisis now can give us a chance to rebuild, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe
Mm-hmm.
we should some things that are, since we're on pause. Yeah.
Well, what would you rebuild given this crisis now that we're on the pandemic? Let's talk about the pandemic. I mean, we're all at home wondering what the hell we're going to do. I mean, you just started this job at the San Francisco Conservatory,
Yeah.
and you can't be there. Is it a come to Jesus moment for the live music industry in terms of what it means to present music or be classical musicians, or any
Well,
thoughts?
who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's. I think I think everyone is dealing with the reality valiantly. I mean, people are doing their
Mm-hmm.
best, and I think I would say not only the pandemic, but the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all just the massive social changes that are happening. The kind of the come to Jesus thing is like how we're representing ourselves as arts organizations,
Mm-hmm.
whom we're serving, what our
Mm-hmm.
role is. I think a lot of arts organizations are rethinking that. I think that's great,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
think the pandemic and all the social change kind of amid the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
is shocking the system a little bit, but I think
Yeah.
probably in a good way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, and so hopefully orchestras will emerge like a little bit more connected to more than one part of the community, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping
Mm-hmm.
that. I'm hoping that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are definitely. I think there's a sort of rejiggering of what it means to be an arts organization in a community and what it means to serve a community, maybe versus, I always think of bringing people to us as musicians versus we musicians going out and
Yeah,
meeting people where they want to be met. And as organizations, I feel like we're always asking people, come into our hall, join us where we are, rather than saying, we want to go to where you are. What do you want, from this
yeah.
organization? So
No,
it's kind
I think that's, it's started to happen. It might speed up the process a little bit, and I think
of, mm-hmm,
I mean, it's a museum culture that we've been in essentially, and
mm-hmm,
still
mm-hmm,
are. And people come in to the museum and they sit quietly, and that's all
mm-hmm,
good. And
mm-hmm,
I think that should be preserved. And I think it's a huge important part of our tradition.
mm-hmm,
But I had this kind of like double think about orchestras, is that they're upholders of tradition, and they're also a collection of versatile musicians who can do anything.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And of course, all of our training is upholding the traditions. That's everything
Right.
I
Mm-hmm,
learned, was how to do that. And
mm-hmm,
I think what I found personally is I've enjoyed using that kind of amazing training that I got to move into other worlds and to explore other things.
Right, right.
And many orchestra musicians do. I think especially younger generations do. Some, you know, some more than others, and it's a big group, and there are lots of opinions. But I think there's. I remember even in the 1980s, Ernest Fleischman, who ran the LA Philharmonic, gave a talk when I was 16. That was very few people were in the room. I was the nerd there. But it's like, yeah, an orchestra is a pool of musicians that could spread out and, you know, go through the threads of the community. And that was in the 80s. People were thinking.
Yeah, that's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, and it's been hard to do that. And maybe some people
Exactly.
think we shouldn't do that. I kind of do. Yeah. So
That's interesting. I mean, speaking of the younger generation of players who may have more of, I wouldn't say a background in outreach, but just that being a larger understood part of the popular culture. But what about, do you think older generations don't have that viewpoint, or do people come around? Are all musicians flexible? Do you come across musicians who don't want to do anything besides play, you know, the great war horses of the classical repertoire?
well, it's hard to generalize, I think. I think one thing I could say is that, you know, I've been going to New World Symphony every year, and even 10 years ago or 15 years ago, the young musicians that were like, get the job in the orchestra, take the audition, you know. And now there's so much more, how are those, you know, what's it like out there? You know, what am I going to do? Or like, what, you know, what other things can I do besides, you know, so they're kind of hedging a little bit more in a certain sense, and I think that's partly because of the way it is now, and that it's not a monoculture in orchestra anymore, which is good.
Right.
I think New World has done a great job also at kind of giving people these looks and opportunities at what's possible. But I find that encouraging. I think classical music is the greatest training for a musician. You know, it's so, where it allows us to do so many different things, and it's nice to see people, like more and more people doing that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've been sort of a huge proponent of bringing all these different elements into, you know, the standard orchestral sound, and really having these collaborations with lots of different musicians. I mean, how do you come up with your ideas? I guess that's a simple way of putting it. I mean, is it music that you like listening to and you think this might be a great combination with the orchestral genre, or where did those collaborations come from?
Yeah, if I'm creating a project, I mean, I've cold called people, you know, like I even, like, back in the day, Nico Muhly, I just called him, you know. It's like his very first CD came out, I loved it, you know, let's do something. Or Dan Deacon, who's this kind of nerdgasm electronica, you know, hyper cartoony guy. It's like, let's write a piece for orchestra. And I read somewhere that he liked Conlon Nancarrow's, you know, piano roll music. So I knew he had some awareness of Cage and Fluxus and all this stuff. And so I thought, okay, this guy actually might really be interested in doing this. And we did a whole project together as well. Or other composers, and or sometimes you meet some along the way. And Dan Levitin, who I collaborated with, who wrote this book, This Is Your Brain on Music, he was on a book tour and had I actually interviewed him just for a pre-concert lecture. He just was going through town, and I asked him if he had done anything with classical music, and he hadn't. He's much more of a rock, you know, work with rock. And so we did a program called Beethoven in Your Brain, which was a neuroscience, you know. And so it's like, it's kind of throwing the idea out on the table and seeing if people are into it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a social thing. I don't sit in a room and like, I've got it, you know, it's much more like interactive,
Yeah. But it's more reactive to what you hear and think about and the people that you meet, rather than I've got this great idea, I have to create it. Or does it, you know, does it come internally, or is it a response to what you see around in your environment?
It started more environmentally, you know, and now it's more conceptual sometimes, depending on the project. So if I'm doing a sound box, which is a multimedia thing, I'm like thinking I'm sitting in my room thinking about it, kind of almost like a composer. And like, I have one idea, and then I connect it to that idea, and then it becomes an evening, you know, where various things happen. And maybe MTT was a good, you know, since Michael's was novice, I worked with him for so many years and saw his mind work from a more pure, kind of less environmental way. I kind of started trying it, you know, and yeah. How about you? But when you put your stuff together, is it more, where do you start?
I really start with, I usually hear something or read something or someone tells me something where I'm like, it just sparks an interest of, huh, I've never thought of that in that way before.
Mm.
How do you logically follow that train of thought or that sound that I heard? Then, I find out who said that thing or who wrote that thing and sort of, follow that train and see where it takes me. So a lot of it really is driven from being stimulated from stuff that I hear or see or people that I meet, but as with you, I mean, there are some things which are completely internal. Like I have a deep interest in mental health.
Hmm.
And so some of my projects come from that personal interest, regardless of what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot in different directions depending on the project. But I always find it really interesting, where creative people find their inspiration. And I think that, I guess a lot of people think that you sit around with your thinking cap on and you try to be creative, and which I don't think is really the case, because there's so much that we react to things in life and things around us. And that's part of being creative is
Yeah.
it's not just, there's an external component where you're reacting and collaborating with other people rather than just being in your head.
Yeah, that moment is. I do think I'm in my head a lot though. Just
Yeah.
like walking the
How so?
dog or like waking before I
Mm-hmm.
get out of bed, like between when I wake up and like get up. And I think I love what David Lynch says about this. It's like fishing. You're just always fishing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
like if you're in this kind of open state of like you said, curious or just aware,
Mm-hmm.
um, something will bite and connect, and then oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like I had a thing for a concert where a spooky thing where, at one point I wanted to have these people just stand up around the audience on stage, in the audience, just in black and just point to something,
Whoa, really?
and I was like,
Uh-huh.
okay, how can I make a concert where that's like the key point of the concert? And
Huh.
maybe because I loved horror movies, but it was like some idea, and then
Mm-hmm.
it became a soundbox about dreaming and dreams, and
Ah. Did you have people in black stand up in the
I
audience,
did
and
do it, yeah.
what was the reaction? Were people creeped
Some people
out
were
or?
kind of scared,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can imagine.
It was a mild version of it, but I think concert halls are so safe, and so
Right.
and it's so us them all the time, and so
Mm-hmm.
I always maybe
Yeah.
also being an '80s kid and just I was always kind of I was like the person who wanted to be punk but wouldn't like dye my hair blue or was too
Mm-hmm.
conservative,
Right,
but
yeah.
the instinct to disrupt it and to mess with things and to
Mm-hmm. It's in
was
your soul.
it's like a real old thing for me. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's like
yeah.
why not do that? And because it would be amazing to feel this kind of thing happen
Yeah,
around you.
yeah,
As
yeah.
long as you felt safe, I don't want people to panic,
Right,
but
right, right.
you know.
Yeah.
But I
But
did
that's really
realize that has like scary connotations in it. And
right, right.
yeah, yeah.
It does,
Like in
strangers
real
standing
life,
up in
yeah,
black. Well, exactly. And it can be threatening depending.
yeah.
But as you said, the concert hall is a safe space. But I like this idea of conception versus reality, because you had this idea of, people in black standing in the audience. I mean, that applies to projects, but also music. I think you hear it a certain way, but as conductors, we have to convince others to do what we hear in our heads, right? So do you find a disconnect sometimes about, a piece of music as you conceive it versus how it comes out in real life? Does that make sense?
I mean, constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, but not disappointed.
Uh-huh.
I think in the early days it was disappointment and dismay, you know, and now it's like
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's much more like it's much more about maneuvering now around those things, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was kind of bulldozing my way as as a conductor a little bit, and then
Right.
I think now I'm more like weaving and surfing my way through,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
through these things and actually appreciating what I'm hearing, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if I don't appreciate it, I just get the best I can out of it, and
Right, right. Yeah.
or emphasize something else, or yeah,
Right.
you
And
know
I
that
think,
feeling. Yeah.
yeah, no, but I think that's a skill that you have to develop that, again, you don't really learn about that in school, right? It's sort of a certain type of diplomacy where you
Mhm.
need to convince people to do something a certain way, which is not matching up to what you want, or you hear something and it's completely, the opposite of what you're aiming for. But you have to find a way to communicate that where, you get the best out of people without insulting them or offending them or freaking them out or,
Or making
is
them feel less than, or like
right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. Yeah.
And yeah, it's really you can't. I guess you could teach that in school. I mean, they could do like training of like first learner. I mean, you learn that in like
I
business
guess you
school,
could.
right?
Yeah,
Don't
no,
they,
that's true.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in conducting school you should learn that too. But that's, I mean, you were a couple weeks ago on my seminar. You
Mm-hmm,
know,
mm-hmm.
I ran an online seminar at San Francisco Conservatory, and just my, I really wanted it. It was a really cool collection of conductors, you among them,
Mm-hmm.
and all of you spoke so well. But there are so many different ways and so many different paths. And again, it's that monoculture of like, who's the
Mm-hmm.
next Dudamel is a bit crazy and toxic, and it's not as fun actually. It doesn't let
No,
people be who they
no.
are. They're trying to be
Yeah,
something else.
yeah.
And I thought all of you guys were so great at kind of, it could be this, it could be this, watch out
Mm-hmm,
for
mm-hmm.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's important to, as you said, sort of be true to yourself. I mean, that's part of being an artist. It's like knowing where you come from and your point of view and your preferences and your strengths, really, and to play to those. And I think one of your strengths is having this incredible background where it's just not just classical music. So you're very much steeped in these other traditions. And so that you're, comfortable bringing them together. Is that sort of part of how you view yourself, or
Oh,
how
definitely.
you view?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, growing up around jazz and rock musicians,
Mm-hmm.
I'm neither a jazz nor a rock musician.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't in any way, shape, or form. I love listening to it and
Mm-hmm.
working with them, but I think in a way that was what I got from the cradle, more than,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I'm kind of jealous of people who got classical music from the cradle. I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
it's always a little insecurity for me, but I think like for jazz, if I work with a jazz musician or they know that I know their music and that
Mm-hmm.
I really
Mm-hmm.
know, I feel it, I respect it.
Right.
I'm a fan, like I'm into it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it creates this kind of ease, in those collaborations.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Because I mean, although musicians are musicians, I think in the different genres, you almost speak a different language in a way, right? I mean, you can talk about, the bridge to the chorus, and that
Yeah.
makes sense to one group of people, and the orchestra's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So there's a lot of translating to be done in between all those.
Yeah, I
those,
mean,
those
literally
groups.
great musicians who don't happen to read music. That's
That
often
too,
the case.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's major because then how do you describe like measure 2022, and
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and it very funny, like in the Metallica project I did, in the scores,
Mm-hmm.
there are notes and rehearsal numbers, but there are also like little nicknames of each section.
Ah.
So like that's how the band communicates where to start.
That's so
like,
interesting.
Oh, let's take it from Thin Lizzy too, and then
Right.
because the songs are very specifically structured. But,
Right.
But it's their way to do it because they don't write down anything at all.
Yeah. That must have been a fun project.
It was amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
The record is coming out on the 28th, so that's very exciting. We're in the
Yay.
pre-release phase, but yeah, that was one of like the towering, like that. It was just so big and it remains so big. And I think my like takeaway from the whole thing is like I'm the Hannah Montana of conductors or something right now. It's like,
What does
like
that mean?
Classical musician by day, but now like it's almost like the Metallica thing is it's just become an identity and almost or part. It really is like seeing Instagram. It's like 2/3 of my Instagram followers are now Metallica.
Right.
So
yeah.
I feel, and I love that. I think it's amazing. And luckily, I think there's more to come and more collaboration with them coming up. But it was neat to be welcomed by a whole community of people. And in fact, this is something really interesting, actually. Again, kind of going back to classical music, is so many of my classical music friends are like frightened by this music or metal or aggressive music like that, and like, what was it like going into that? And I went to this 2 weeks before I did S&M. My friend, who's do you know Owen Lee in the Cincinnati Symphony? He's the principal bass.
Yeah.
Good friend, my high school stand partner, huge metalhead, and he celebrated his 50th in Vegas going to this Psycho Las Vegas festival, which is just
awesome.
Essentially like a stoner metal festival, but really interesting group of people. They had like Godspeed You Black Emperor and the original Misfits. It really was more eclectic, but
Huh.
it was like the most welcoming, nice community, and not
Mm-hmm.
snobby, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, and I would say similarly with the Metallica experience, it was such like there was so much love in the room, and there's
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
much warmth from the band, but also from the
Mm-hmm.
fans. And I said, what if classical music people were like that, you know? And we're
Mm,
kind of like,
imagine.
but isn't it funny? It's like we're supposed to be like the, you know, the good natured, like for the old people, whatever, you know,
Right,
cliche.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But often, you know, we're the most off-putting situation a new person can walk into, because maybe
No,
not
that's true.
not you and me, but you know,
No,
someone
yeah.
might come to a Beethoven symphony and some audience member glares at them, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, they don't know what to do and no one tells them what to do, or
Right,
you
right.
know, and I think we have so much work to do, you know, but I just have this kind of now, you know, one takeaway of this experience I've had doing this
Mm-hmm.
concert is like, what if we were like that? You know, what if we
Mm-hmm.
could change the culture to be a more like, yes, you know,
Right. Uh-huh.
and
It's true. It's
you're
true.
one of us now. Here's a T-shirt,
Right,
you
right.
know?
Come and join us.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there's a lack of that, inviting to be a part of it. I think there's a very like, the fourth wall is very much there in classical music
yeah.
where,
Or do you know
we
enough?
know.
Why are you here? What brought you
Yeah,
here? You know, it's
yeah,
like, and maybe
exactly.
it's nice, but it's like kind of not nice. It's a funny, you know, even people
Well,
who mean well may say completely the wrong thing, you know, to
no,
a
it's
new
interesting
person.
because I think, yeah, there's an implication of like elitism, like you need to know about what we're doing to really enjoy what classical music is. And that's been sort of the party line, or it was for a long time. And now it's sort of rethinking that and saying, well, you don't need to, have heard Mahler 3 a billion times to be able to appreciate it. You should sit down and be able to just enjoy music, and coming
Yeah.
at that from, it's a much more sort of honest, basic standpoint rather than you have
Do
to
you
know all the
remember like
shit.
when you first heard like these pieces? I remember some moments. I remember I was in a violin shop and I heard Don Juan on the radio.
Mm.
I was like, "What's that?" I was with my bass teacher and he said, "Oh, you'll find out someday. Like it's a great piece. It's an amazing. You're gonna love it." But
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and I was like, "Yes, I'm sure I will." But as I
mm-hmm,
listened to that music, it made absolutely no sense to me. You know, on the radio, it was
mm-hmm.
going so fast. It was so complicated. I'd never heard anything like it, and it was like I wanted to know more about it, but
Mm-hmm,
there wasn't an immediate kind of oh, you know, yes.
mm-hmm.
And uh, I remember a lot of, you know, how that's not always the case though. The first time I heard the Rite of Spring, I was like, yes, I get this. I
Right,
love
right.
this, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So it depends on the piece, but I think I don't know. I think all music rewards repeated listening, right? Like
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
for these fans, you know, if they hear Master of Puppets, you know, I mean
Mm-hmm.
the amount of like the other thing I've learned is the amount of like attention to detail and minutia and like you know
Mm.
that people love this stuff so much they know every little thing about it, just like
Right,
we
right,
know
right.
every little thing about every
Yeah,
conductor recording or you know
right.
yeah the Furtwängler, you know, 1943 Bruckner 7, like the same thing
Oh, the
exists. Yeah,
specificity.
yeah, yeah.
No, but it is the same thing for, fans of Metallica or fans of any other, jazz fans who know like this recording of this. And yeah, it really is. There's a level of detail that we don't think about, that really applies to all music, which is,
So it is,
it's
yeah,
cool.
you know, classical music is different, right? Because it's longer.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, the emotional range is quite wide, what it can
Mm-hmm.
do. Kind of the long narrative flow is really,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so it's not, I'm not saying all music is the same because I don't think it is.
Sure, sure.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what's great about music. It's
Mm-hmm.
not all the same, but, you know, what we can do, you know, it's kind of like the good message because people are such eclectic listeners now and are actually open to it. Is
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
what do we do that's really special? And what if you're coming
Mm-hmm.
into our zone for a while, and you may stay, you may love it, it may become some part of what you listen to. Like, what are we
Mm-hmm.
giving you that is really unique and different
Right.
than thrash metal or
Right.
bebop or ambient music or you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I like that approach. Um, so San Francisco Conservatory, did you always want to go into teaching? Is this a logical outgrowth of something, or is it a new direction, or how do you view your new role?
I think it's a home base for me, hopefully for a while. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know, I think I'm like old enough now to teach.
Like what, we're wise enough at this
I like
age to
sort
have
of
something to
old, my
say.
hair's
Yeah.
gray, you know,
No,
it's
no,
like,
don't say
uh,
that. Don't say that.
right. No, but you know what I mean? Like if I were 30, I mean, I always did teach and I always did educational stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
I think, um, and I've always enjoyed it. And I just
Mm-hmm.
thought I'd ran a really terrific orchestra for 10 years. I'd done
Mm-hmm.
great work there. I'm proud of it. I think everyone else is proud of what we did there. And then do I want to kind of repeat that in a different part of the
Mm-hmm.
country, or do I want a different challenge? And the
Right.
thing about the San Francisco Conservatory right now is it's growing really rapidly, and there's
Mm-hmm.
still a lot of room to build a culture there.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I can kind of, it isn't as, you know, it's just in a good way. It's changing every year into something completely different. And
Mm-hmm.
I love the people there, the people who are running, David Stull and all my other colleagues who are there, the other faculty who are my old friends. And I think uh, I just wanted to be a part of that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, right time in my life, right
Mm-hmm.
place,
Mm-hmm.
California, which I love. I'm from there.
Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
back, I've come and gone from California like 3 times. Like I
Right.
grew up there, went to Boston, moved
Mm-hmm.
back,
Move
went to
back.
Oklahoma, Florida, moved back, went to
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, moved back. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a ping pong game. It always kind of goes back to California, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know,
And now
I
you're
like it.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've always found, yeah. Don't you find working with younger people just super fun usually?
Oh yeah. No, it's incredibly stimulating, and they just, sometimes they approach things very differently. Just not just music, but life and interactions and the way they see the world. And like, I think that's incredibly important for people our age.
I
This could be the
know.
point where you become uncool and like you stop paying attention to what's happening in the world. But they sort of force you to see what people of that generation are seeing. And I think that's so important. Just personally, apart from musically and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be like hugely into TikTok or whatever, the kids are doing, but
It's amazing.
oh, really?
I watch too much TikTok, but it might go
Oh,
away, so you never know. Anyway, but
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
But no, but you do learn. And like, I just love seeing like what the next wave of musicians is going to be. And it's always
Mm-hmm.
different. We were different than the people before us. And we've seen, a few people come after us. We're not that old, but,
Right.
it's a different time. And so I love that. And I love that there's always new people. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a
Mm-hmm.
firm belief that conductors shouldn't stay too long, as a
Mm-hmm.
music director. So when 10 years were up in Kitchener, I announced 8 years in, it's like, I won't stay more than 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just want you guys to go to the next thing at the right time. I want to
Right.
leave,
Right. Right.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, while we're still doing well. And,
Mm-hmm.
and, and that worked. And I think in a conservatory, there might be a slightly longer timeline
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because the orchestra is constantly renewing and there are more.
Right.
So because I do have a kind of a desire to do a 20-year thing, or really,
Mm-hmm.
and that seems like a more logical way, at least for my personality, to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, all right, last question. So what have you, I mean, given that we're talking about, what you want to do in 20 years, like at our age, I think conductors, some people are, if you're in a different career path, it might be at a point where you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to retire in like 14 or 15 years. But for conductors, we're like mid-career. We're just hitting our stride, right? So
We're
there
gonna be like,
must be, yeah, I know.
and then people are like, amazing, that's so
You
amazing.
can still move. But so what are, some of the things that you want to see for yourself, like that you've not done, that you want to do, where you see, what is your, not entirely your future, but like a couple of things that you absolutely want to do?
I hope I can change the culture, you know, by doing projects that people like, oh, okay, that's one way to do it. And so the conservatory is one, building a culture there could give me a chance. And I think, I've spent, it's almost more progressive for me because maybe you feel the same way. When you're a young conductor, you're put into all these different slots and you're kind of tried out by various people. And then you persist and kind of, you find out who you are, as a conductor, what you had to offer that's special. And then at our, almost 50, you're like, oh, people are actually letting me do this now. And,
right. And they're like, okay with it.
And not just one person, like 3 people. And,
right.
and, but it, even in the last, 4 or 5 years, it's like, oh, more people, I feel like, okay, I can do more stuff now. And not only, the people who know me and love me for 10 years or 15 years or like keep doing what I'm doing, but I'm also, oh, we'd like to check this out. And,
right.
And so I think for me, just constantly doing offbeat, crazy stuff, and continue, whatever it might be. And I think like the culture, making it, just connect and training musicians to be like, to wipe away the cobwebs of what, where we live. I think there's just a lot of cobwebs. Yeah. And I think it's not serving the music. It's not serving people's reaction to the music. There's, the dust is getting in the way of the lens, and the ears, Yeah. And so I just want to see what I can do that, and it's very instinctive. It's not a master plan, but that's what I'm looking for, to clear the way, and to keep the music alive. Yeah. For a long time to come.
Yeah. And I feel like with you, that's really, as you said, it's really authentic for you. I mean, it comes from the heart. It's something you believe in. It's not, as you said, a grandmaster plan, but just a way that you see the world, and you want to get people to see it that way too.
Yeah. And, I'm jealous. I love, if I were like an old German Brahms specialist and like.
The hands keep coming up.
No, of course, and I love those people. Like, I love those people. I love the way they make music. I love how deep, and I love all, it's just, I'm more of a kind of that's not my path, to obsess about 4 symphonies, but the fact that there are people out there doing it, thank God, because
that's beautiful,
I go to
too,
them,
exactly.
And for me, like, I want new audiences. I really think and I know what new audiences react to. I'm not a new audience member. Like, I'm perfectly happy to go see an old dude conduct Bruckner 6, with a great orchestra. I'm very happy to hear that. Like, and with no talking, no lights, nothing, So it's not, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it but I also love those experiences where you lose, where it's wondrous and like something totally unexpected happens. So not only those, so for me, like seeing Star Wars for the first time and hearing Ives 4 for the first time are not that different. They're not that different to me. Like, they're wondrous experiences. Like, a new world is revealed. You lose your sense of where you are, what you're doing, and you're just like, oh my God, I didn't know this was possible. And I was lucky, maybe through all the different kinds of music I heard, So when Ives 4 came into my ears, it all kind of,
It made sense, yeah.
It made sense, but everyone has a different kind of listening path and journey on the way there.
I love that. Wondrous experiences. I think I'm going to leave it there. Just think of wondrous experiences. Hey, thanks so much, Edwin.
Oh my God, it's so nice to talk to you again.
I know. It was like, good to chat about just stuff. And,
Yeah, I'm moving out sooner than we expected. So I'll be out there in the fall. So maybe we can meet in the Bay Area with, the proper distance, and we can
with the socially distanced, we can have a drink across the park. Wave,
or like light torches, like Lord of the Rings. Like, I'll be at top of Twin Peaks, and you can be on top.
Oh my God! Or at this like smoke signals at this point. Whatever it is.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Edwin. And for everyone who's viewing, this interview will be up on IGTV right after we're done, and it'll also be on YouTube next week. And last week's interview with Laserbeak is up on YouTube now. No, in an hour. It's not there yet. Thanks, Edwin.
Bye, Sarah.
Take care. Bye.